everyone. My grandmother died one morning making rice. It was just a few days before her 91st birthday, and making rice was a ritual that she had performed thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times in her life. And that morning she died, I was actually on my way to my parents' home where she lived to take my mom to the doctor, and when I pulled into their condo building, I saw a fire truck and paramedics, and there's a lot of older people that live in the building, and I thought, wow, this is the final home for a lot of people that live in this building. But by the time I had parked, I had just completely forgotten all about it until I turned the corner to my parents' hallway and saw that the paramedics were at my parents' condo, and I rushed to the door and stood in the doorway, and I saw my abuelita, my grandmother, laying on the kitchen floor, and she had raw rice scattered all around her body. And as someone who, up until that point, had been very scared of death, this vision of my grandmother was really comforting because she looked at peace. She looked 20 years younger. Some of her wrinkles had completely disappeared. And it left me thinking, what happens in your final moment? What happens in your last breath? And I would like to imagine that in your final moment, you see loved ones that have passed on before you, and they welcome you to the other side. And this wish, this hope, this vision that I have for my final moment is something that was really brought to life for me when my abuelita's sister, my tia Chava, when she was in her final moments, she outstretched her arms because she could see my grandmother, and they had a conversation. We couldn't see her, but Chava sure saw her. And just a few hours later, Chava made her transition. "20 years passed, and I hadn't given death much thought until the pandemic hit, and I started losing my elders one by one by one. Ending with Inés, who passed away and made her transition on New Year's Day of this year. And the next day, my husband tested positive for COVID. And a couple days after, my daughter and I tested positive for COVID. And I was like, this is not what 2022 is going to look like. This is not the beginning of this year. I refuse for this to be the beginning of this year. Now, Inés was really special to me. She was like a second mother to me. When I was growing up in Lakeview in Chicago, my parents had a red brick two-flat, and my younger brother and my mom and dad lived on the first floor, and three of my aunts, Inés, Dora, and Rosalba, lived on the second floor, and I was always going up there, or they were coming downstairs. It was a house full of music and love and great food, and Inés and I had a really, really special connection. She really was like a second mother to me. When I was young, she taught me how to play the piano. When I was a teenager into young adulthood, she's the one that I would stay up with till all hours of the night, drinking coffee and chismeando and talking about boys. And on the day before she died, my daughter Stella and I went to visit her, and my daughter Stella gave her the last bite of food that Inés had ever had. And it was, for me, this really beautiful symbol of the circle of life because Ines used to feed me when I was a child. A couple weeks later, we went to Costa Rica on a trip with some family friends. And my husband, Anthony, and Stella and I got to Costa Rica a few days earlier, and we ended up in a really remote part of the country, Nosara, which you can only get to through a really rough road full of potholes. And we got there late at night, and we had booked a room at a bed and breakfast that was run by this amazing, eccentric French couple who had moved there and had been living there for 20 years. So we rung the front doorbell, and we were greeted at the gate by the husband, and he let us in, and we walked through this pathway, and on either side we were surrounded by trees and tropical plants, all these things that he had lovingly planted 20 years earlier. And so we walk up the path, and I see this woman standing there on this big patio, which was their lobby, and it was also where the dining room was, this big communal table outside where all the people who were staying at the bed and breakfast would eat together in the morning. And this was the wife. And so I go up to her, and she stretches her arms out, and she goes, "Hi, I'm Ines." And I almost fell on the floor. That trip was so special because I saw Ines everywhere. There was a white butterfly that followed me around that country because we went to several different parts of the country, and everywhere I went, if I'd be walking down a path, there'd be a single white butterfly that would float past me, and I thought, this is Ines. And she's blessing this trip and saying, this is where you're supposed to be. And a couple days later, my husband and daughter and I were on the beach at night, by the ocean, under a full moon, and we brought in the year in the proper way. That was the beginning of our 2022. And I took my grief and I swallowed it. Two months ago, another full moon, and I found myself wandering in the Israeli desert. I had gone there with a group of about 30 storytellers from around the United States and Latin America. And on our last night in Israel, we were taken to the Negev crater, which is the largest crater in the world. And it was nighttime, and our bus takes us down to the crater and leaves us there, and we are in complete darkness. The moon hadn't come out yet. So here we are, and it's just the desert dirt and the mountains and the stars, and that's it. And they told us, don't turn on your cell phones for light, your eyes will adjust. So we're all there, and we're told that we're going to engage in a Jewish, it's a spontaneous prayer. It's about going to a place where you normally don't go, where you go by yourself and you just start praying, whatever that means to you, whether it's talking to God, to the universe, expressing your hopes, your dreams, your regrets, whatever comes out is what's supposed to come out. So they told us, each of us, to just start walking. And there's a little bit of faith involved, right? Here you are walking, I don't know where I'm going, you can barely see, but you just start walking. I started walking, and the first thing that came to my mind was just being so grateful to be in this space. It was one of the most beautiful things and one of the most special nights of my life. I know it will always be. And I started giving thanks. And then I started crying because all of a sudden I felt the presence of my elders that I had lost. I saw them in the stars, and it was this incredible feeling, a feeling so grounded, but also feeling of the sky, of the universe. I was here and I was there and everywhere in between, and we were connected. We were connected. And that grief just started coming up, 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 and I was crying, and I started saying their names in the dark desert sky. Cesar, Mauro, Inés. We don't talk enough about death and grief and mourning in this society. I have an invitation for you. I know we've all lost someone, someone's, a dream, a goal. We've all lost something in the last couple of years. So I invite all of us to really hold each other right now in this moment as I ask you all to softly close your eyes, if you are comfortable doing so. And I want you to think and connect with whoever or whatever you may have lost in the last couple of years. And if you are so moved to name it, name them, we will hold you. And this can be for you wherever you are in your grieving process. It can be a moment of release. It can be a moment of connection. Or as it was for me that night in the desert, both of them, a release and a connection. So let's close our eyes and say their names. Mirna.
Eunice.
Amy. Veronica.
Tom.
Lillian. Derek.
Sadie.
Damone. Faye. Ashley.
Sammy.
Omar. Frank.
Jeff.
Tim.
Jeff.
Estelle.
Thank you. Before I leave you, I want to leave you with a song. It's one of my favorite songs. It's a Mexican folkloric song. And this song talks about loss, but it also talks about the connection possible once someone has made the transition. Now, in this song, it's not a white butterfly, it's a white dove. And in the first verse, a man has lost his love, and the ay, 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 ay's that you hear are his cries trying to connect with her. And in the second verse, her cucurucucus are her coming back as a dove and reuniting with him. Dicen que por las noches no más le iban puro llorar. Dicen que no dormía, no más le iban puro tomar. Juran que el mismo cielo se estremecía al oír su llanto. Cómo sufrió por ella, que hasta en la muerte la fue llamando. Ay, 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 ay. Lloraba. Ay, 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 ay. Mía. Ay, 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 ay. Lloraba de pasión horda. Moría. Que una paloma blanca muy de mañana le iba a cantar. a su casita sola con sus puertitas de par en par en par en par. Juran que esa paloma no es otra cosa más que su alma y todavía la espera pa' que regrese la desdichada.